You know, there's an old saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And when you look at the recent events unfolding within the British royal family, you can't help but hear the echoes of the past. To truly understand the quiet, deliberate decision by King Charles to remove his granddaughter, Princess Lilibet, from the family's official website, we have to look back. We have to understand that this isn't just a 21st century drama fueled by social media and celebrity culture. This is a story about power, duty, and the monarchy's primal instinct for survival. A story that has played out before. Before Meghan Markle, there was another American divorcee who captured the heart of a king and threatened to bring the monarchy to its knees. Wallis Simpson. In 1936, King Edward VIII, Charles's great-uncle, was faced with an impossible choice: the crown or the woman he loved. The establishment, the government, the Church of England, the royal family itself made it clear that he could not have both. To be king was to be married to the nation, and that was a sacred vow that came before any personal desire. In the end, Edward chose love. He abdicated the throne, passing the immense burden of kingship to his unprepared, stammering younger brother, the man who would become King George VI, Charles's grandfather. That single act, the abdication crisis, became the defining trauma of the modern monarchy. It was a near-fatal wound. It taught the House of Windsor a lesson that has been passed down through the generations. The institution is always more important than the individual. The survival of the crown depends on the absolute, unwavering commitment of the monarch and their family to public duty. Personal happiness is a luxury. Service is a requirement. King Charles grew up in the shadow of that crisis. He saw firsthand how his grandfather was forced onto the throne and how his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, dedicated her entire 70-year reign to repairing that damage, to being the epitome of selfless duty. And that is the lens through which we must view this entire saga. What we have been watching over the last 5 years is not just a family dispute. It is, in the king's eyes, a slow-motion abdication crisis. It is the story of a senior prince choosing a personal path that is incompatible with his public role. And King Charles, having learned the brutal lessons of history, has made the calculated decision to intervene, to cauterize the wound before it can threaten the monarchy's future. The removal of a name from a website is not the beginning of this story. It is the end of a chapter. It is the consequence of a long series of choices, and today we're going to walk through those choices step by step to understand how we got here. To understand the royal mindset, you have to stop thinking of them as just a family and start thinking of them as a business. It's a strange, ancient, and often dysfunctional business, but it's a business nonetheless. Prince Philip, the late Duke of Edinburgh, famously referred to it as the firm. He was, for decades, its sharp-witted and unsentimental manager. He helped modernize the estates, professionalize the staff, and instill a sense of corporate purpose. And like any business, the firm has a contract with its shareholders, in this case, the British public. It's an unwritten, invisible contract, but it's very real. The terms are simple. The public provides the royals with immense wealth, privilege, and status. In return, the royals dedicate their entire lives to public service. They show up, they work hard, they remain politically neutral, and, most importantly, they do not complain. They uphold their side of the bargain. This brings us to the core of the problem. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, in the eyes of the institution and a large portion of the public, broke that invisible contract. They wanted to renegotiate the terms. They proposed a hybrid model where they could be half in, half out of the family business. They wanted the freedom and financial opportunities of a private life in America, while retaining the titles, security, and prestige of their royal status. They wanted to be a global brand, but they wanted that brand to be built on the foundation of the British monarchy. To King Charles, and to the memory of his parents, this was simply not an option. You're either a working member of the firm, with all the sacrifices that entails, or you are not. There is no middle ground. Their proposal was rejected, and their subsequent actions were seen as a deliberate attempt to build a rival brand by damaging the parent company. Let's examine the evidence, because the pattern of behavior is crucial to understanding the king's final decision. The opening salvo in this public war was the interview with Oprah Winfrey. It's hard to overstate the impact of this event. It was a perfectly executed piece of television, designed for maximum emotional impact. But when you strip away the dramatic music and the sympathetic questioning, you are left with a series of claims that have since come under serious scrutiny. The most explosive was the allegation of racism. The claim that a senior royal questioned the potential skin color of their unborn child was a global headline. But the vagueness of the accusation was also its weakness. By refusing to name the person, they cast a cloud of suspicion over everyone, including the late Queen and Prince Philip. It was an accusation impossible to defend against precisely because it was so unspecific. In the years since, no further evidence has been offered. To the palace, this wasn't speaking truth to power. It was a reckless and damaging allegation that threatened the king's relationship with the 56 nations of the Commonwealth, one of the cornerstones of the monarchy's global influence. Then there was the claim about mental health. Meghan's description of her suicidal thoughts was deeply moving, and her claim that she was denied help by the institution was shocking. But again, the details were murky. The institution is a faceless entity. It's unclear who exactly she spoke to. The royal family has access to the world's best doctors. It seems inconceivable that Harry, a co-founder of the mental health charity Heads Together, would have been unable to find private, professional help for his wife. The claim, while powerful, painted a picture that many found difficult to reconcile with the known facts. Finally, there was the demonstrably false claim about the secret wedding. It may seem trivial, but it was incredibly damaging to their credibility. When the Archbishop of Canterbury himself had to publicly state that the legal wedding was the public ceremony, it proved that the Sussexes were willing to bend the truth to fit their preferred narrative. If they were inaccurate about something so easily fact-checked, it led people to wonder what else in their story might not be the full picture. The Oprah interview was a success in terms of grabbing headlines, but it began a long process of eroding their own credibility. If Oprah was the initial attack, the Netflix series was the declaration of a long-term siege. For 6 hours, the world was treated to a highly polished, one-sided account of their grievances. The series was notable for its personal attacks on family members, particularly Prince William. The portrayal of the heir to the throne as a screaming, bullying figure was a direct assault on the future of the monarchy. It was also filled with small but telling moments of what many perceived as disrespect, such as Meghan's exaggerated reenactment of a curtsy. For an institution built on protocol and respect, this was seen as mockery. It confirmed the palace's fear that the Sussexes were not interested in healing any rifts, but in profiting from them. The final nail in the coffin of the family relationship was, without a doubt, the memoir, Spare. Never before had a senior royal so publicly broken the code of silence. The book was a raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal account of Harry's life, but it was also a catalog of betrayals. By putting into print the details of a physical fight with his brother, he made any future private reconciliation almost impossible. How can you ever trust someone again who you know is keeping a record of your every angry word, to be published for a multi-million-dollar advance? His depiction of his stepmother, Queen Consort Camilla, as a calculating figure who traded stories with the press was a direct attack on his father's wife, the new queen. For Charles, who had spent decades carefully rehabilitating Camilla's public image after the death of Princess Diana, this must have felt like an act of pure sabotage. The book was a commercial triumph, but it was a personal catastrophe. It burned every bridge, not just with the institution, but with the very family members, his father and brother, who he claimed to want a relationship with. At this point, the king was faced with an undeniable reality. His son was actively engaged in a campaign that was causing deep and lasting damage to the core of his family and his life's work. Faced with this unprecedented situation, the palace chose to fight a different kind of war. It was a war of contrasts, of strategic silence, and of quiet competence. While Harry and Meghan were dominating the headlines with their personal struggles, Prince William and Catherine were getting on with the job. Their strategy was simple Show, don't tell. They didn't issue statements rebutting the Sussexes' claims. They simply went to work. They embarked on successful overseas tours. They launched new charitable initiatives. They attended hundreds of dull but necessary public engagements. Every picture of them smiling, shaking hands, and comforting people was a silent counterpoint to the drama from California. They became the living embodiment of the keep calm and carry on spirit that the monarchy prides itself on. They were the dependable, dutiful future, and the public responded positively. Behind the scenes, the palace was not entirely passive. The timely leak of the bullying allegations against Meghan, just before the Oprah interview, was a clear sign that the firm was willing to protect itself. It was a reminder that there were two sides to this story. While Meghan was preparing to talk about her pain, her former staff members were, through sources, talking about theirs. It was a brutal but effective move in a high-stakes PR battle. It muddied the waters and prevented Meghan from claiming the undisputed status of a victim. The subsequent internal investigation, whose findings have been kept private, has allowed that cloud of uncertainty to remain, a permanent question mark next to the Sussexes' narrative of compassionate leadership. All of these events, all of these choices, led to that one quiet decision in the king's office. The removal of Lilibet's profile was not a beginning. It was an end. It was the king looking at all the evidence, the interviews, the books, the attacks on his wife and his heir, and making a final judgment. It was a business decision. The California franchise was officially declared rogue, and its license was revoked. The king's message was clear. You cannot be part of this family's public identity while simultaneously working to undermine it. What does this mean for the future? For the monarchy, it is a moment of consolidation. King Charles has asserted his authority and laid down a clear marker for his reign. The era of the slimmed-down monarchy is here, and the price of inclusion is absolute loyalty and service. He has, in his own quiet way, resolved the crisis. He has learned from a history of the 1936 abdication and has acted to prevent a similar erosion of the crown's authority. He has protected the line of succession and provided a clear, stable path forward for William and George. For Harry and Meghan, the path is far less certain. Their primary product, their story of royal grievance, has now been told. They risk becoming a one-note act. To remain relevant, they must pivot. They must build a new brand, one that is based on their own future achievements, not on their past royal connections. The challenge they face is that the global interest in them has always been directly tied to their proximity to the royal family. As that connection is officially and symbolically severed, they risk fading into the general sea of American celebrity. At the end of the day, this entire saga can be boiled down to a few simple truths. It's a story about consequences. It's a story about the difference between celebrity, which is fleeting and based on public attention, and royalty, which is permanent and based on public duty. Harry and Meghan made their choice. They chose a life of personal expression and financial freedom in America. It is a choice they had every right to make. But choices have consequences. They chose to leave the family business. And now, the new CEO has simply and finally removed their names from the company letterhead.